Happy Friday, everyone. Welcome. Welcome. You are joining Intentional Conversations VodCast, and we're so glad you're here. I am Dr. Nika White. My pronouns are she, her. I am the founder and lead principal consultant for NWC, and we are delighted to bring this learning experience to the broader community week after week during this hour. We hope that you are coming ready to be enlightened, ready to be stretched, ready to be informed. And we are so grateful that you get a chance to hear from a wonderful guest co-host today that I can't wait to introduce momentarily. As we continue to allow just a moment or two for people to get settled into this virtual learning space, I want to just take a moment and invite all of you who are part of our Zoom community to go to the chat. Let us know where you are joining the conversation from today. That is always a big treat for us to see the many different individuals who are represented across the US and even beyond. It's always so exciting to us. So share in the chat those geographies that you are representing today. This is our last intentional conversations of the month of July, and we're going to close it out with a bang. And as you're sharing in the chat, I also want to let you know that we do go live on LinkedIn. So we have some folks that perhaps are joining us via LinkedIn Live. And I want you to know that we are paying close attention to the comment section there. And so feel free to also share where you're joining the conversation from. And we will continue to watch that and bring a lot of the expressions and sentiments, questions over into the Zoom community so that we all can be collected in our conversations today as we learn with and from each other. If you're part of the Zoom committee, then I will tell you that cameras are always encouraged. We love to see smiling faces, but it's not required. And so in whatever capacity in which you're joining us today, we are grateful that you're here. We know that many may have it playing in the background. So just from an auditory perspective, as you multitask, and we're just glad that you decided to be a part of our community today. I also want to let you know that disability inclusion is so important for us at NWC, and we value it. And as such, we do have closed caption that has been enabled for those that may be able to benefit from it. So I wanted to put that into your hearing. Okay, once again, you have joined Intentional Conversations VodCast, and we are so glad you're here. This should be a great show. Welcome, and we look forward to getting started momentarily. Let the conversations begin, and that is precisely what we are about to do. If you're just tuning in, you have joined Intentional Conversations VodCast, where we intersect topics of diversity, equity, and inclusion, belonging, justice, all the things with leadership and business. And we're so glad that you're with us today. I want to go ahead and kick us off. For those who've been a part of our community, you know that one of the things that we really enjoy doing is highlighting some of the national observances. And so since we are still in the month of July, I want to make sure I take a moment to do that. July is Disability Pride Month. And so I want to make sure that you're doing all that you can to stand in solidarity with members of the LGBTQI plus community who are also people with disabilities, not just in the month of July, because July is going to be ending soon, but all throughout the year. July is also BIPOC Mental Health Awareness Month. And I am telling you that there is so much for us to really lean into and talk about consistently to help others to really make sure that their mental strength is something they're keeping top of mind. So let's break the stigma. Many of you know that I have 3 LinkedIn learning courses that are out there, and I hope that you're taking advantage of them. There's a new course to be released relatively soon, and I think it's going to be so timely because it relates to this broad topic of how can we ensure incivility is being addressed proactively in the workplace. And so stay tuned for the release date of that. But meanwhile, there are 3 other courses that are out there. I also want you to know that this is oh my goodness, yes, it's the 26th today. So this is the 1.5-year anniversary of my book, Baby, Inclusion Uncomplicated, which was published by Forbes Books. And I'm so excited because we are doing a special right now where we are offering a complimentary fireside chat with yours truly, me, the author. If there is a purchase a minimum number of books, and that's at a special discount bulk rate. So I am running this through the end of this month. So this is now your chance to take advantage of it. If you would, scan that QR code, let us know if you're interested, and we'll be happy to get that scheduled on the books. Okay, and I've been sharing with you that some of you like to get your content via text just to keep you in the know. And so for those of you who are part of our community, and that is the way that you want us to communicate with you, scan that QR code, let us know. We won't inundate you, but we will make sure that this is a way for us to stay connected. And thank you for all of those who have already signed up to be a part of the text campaign. Now, if you have enjoyed intentional conversations and you have been, able to participate in the live show, but you also know that sometimes you may not be available, and you know of others that really appreciate being able to get their content from a podcast capacity, I want you to know that for quite some time now, Intentional Conversations has been available wherever you like to get your podcast. We extract the audio and we make it available in that capacity. And so just another way for us to extend the reach of our community. Now, at this time, it does me great pleasure to give some information about what we all have to look forward to in the upcoming weeks as we welcome new guest co-hosts to the Intentional Conversations podcast. And so I'm going to start with next week. We actually have Daisy Dominguez, who is going to be kicking off the month of August. So excited to have her. And then following that, we have Ty Christensen, and she is going to be joining us. So mark your calendars for August the 9th. And then around mid-August, we have the opportunity to welcome Elaine Lynn Herring. And so those are some great names. If you don't know those names, be sure you follow them, look them up. We are in for a treat to be able to hear from those individuals. And I'm super excited they have accepted our invitation. So August is going to be fantastic. Now, this is the part that I always enjoy, which is reading the formal bio of our guest co-host. I love for our audience and community to be aware of the accolades, the credentials, the experiences in which our guest co-hosts show up to the conversation with. And so this is the reason that I read the full bio. So today we are welcoming Dr. Erica Wallace as our guest co-host. Dr. Erica Wallace is passionate about amplifying underrepresented voices and connecting people to transformative opportunities. Erica Wallace brings a unique blend of expertise as an educator, a researcher, scholar, and dedicated DEI advocate. With over a decade of experience in higher education and talent development, her focus lies in crafting and in executing innovative programs that empower individuals from diverse backgrounds to excel in their learning and career journeys. She holds a bachelor's degree in sociology, a master's degree in counselor education, and a doctorate degree in educational studies. Beyond her professional endeavors, Erica is an avid Marvel and Star Trek fan, and she cherishes moments spent with her 3 nephews who inspire her to create a more inclusive and empowering world for future generations. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen now so I can bring Dr. Erica into the spotlight with me as we have conversation today. So excited to have you here. Now, one of the things that we do here as tradition before we release our guest co-host to share with our community in whatever way they feel appropriate to greet the community, is to share with us what is one thing that we would not know about you from hearing your bio, which we just did, or from looking at your LinkedIn profile. So welcome, Erica. I'm so glad you're here. Thank you for saying yes to our invitation.
Thank you so much for having me, Dr. Nika. So in the spirit of the Olympics starting, I don't consider myself a sports fan, but I love sports documentaries. So I recently started watching Simone Biles documentary on Netflix. One of my favorite sports documentaries is the Dream Team documentary, the 92 Dream Team. I've also watched the Redeem Team documentary. I just found it so fascinating, like the stories behind these athletes and the stories behind these historic athletic feats, even if I never watch the games, which I rarely do, but the stories are just so fascinating to me.
Thank you so much for sharing that. So we have something in common. First, I love documentaries and I love the Olympics. I can't say that I'm like this avid sports fan where all throughout the year I'm constantly watching sports, but there's something about the Olympics. I absolutely love it. Maybe it is kind of the storytelling aspects to where
Yeah.
it allows us to get even more proximate to those individuals that are competing, And it's exhilarating to watch. And so
Yeah,
thank you. Thank you
agree.
for sharing that.
Yeah.
Yes. Thank you so much for sharing that. Okay. So before we jump into all the things that I know we want to talk about today, it always feels very appropriate to me as the host of Intentional Conversations to make sure that we're holding space for acknowledging and just having a little bit of dialogue around what is top of mind for many of us that show up to this conversation based upon what has made its way into the headlines for that particular week. And there are some things that I know are very top of mind for many of us. And the first is I want to acknowledge and spend some time really just in solidarity of everyone that is grieving behind the loss of the life of Sonia Macy as she was assassinated in her home this week by law enforcement. And I know that many Black women in particular are grieving. There have been lots of conversations where women in my community, we have supported each other, we have checked in on each other. And, we may think that sometimes being witness to those very hard situations allows us to be able to easier accept it. That's not the case. It becomes even more harder. So I just hold space for a moment and check in with you, Dr. Erica, to see how you're doing, how you're processing, and just get your thoughts and reactions to what has been very, very prevalent in the media this week.
Yeah. It's always hard to see these
Yeah.
stories. It unfortunately they keep happening. And I think just kind of the juxtaposition of the assassination of Sonia Massey with the announcement of Kamala Harris being the now presidential nomination for the Democratic Party shows these kind of two sides of the Black experience that we see, this Black and Asian woman rising to the ranks of the possibly the highest office in the country, and yet we are still experiencing police violence. So, like even when Obama was president, we heard the narrative like, oh, racism is over. We have a Black man as president. Like, no, you can have one person that are ascending to these amazing heights, and yet we are still experiencing violence at the hand of the state. So, it's hard. I definitely could not watch the video. My heart can't take it. But I mourn with the family. I hope that one day we can create a world where these things don't happen. But I think it's important that we continue to talk about it and not have this kind of delving into, my research, this narrative of the superwoman that we're immune and we're not human to all
Mm,
of these things that are happening just because a few of us or some of us, have all of these accolades. It's a both and situation.
it's a both and situation. That was a mouthful. Thank you so much, Dr. Erica, just for holding space and sharing your thoughts as you've been processing this week, along with so many of us. I also appreciate the acknowledgement of the juxtaposition. You're right, and I think that for so long as Black African Americans, we have had to hold both space for the joy and the trauma.
Hmm.
And this week has been interesting in that while there's been a lot of excitement and joy around VP Harris's nomination by the Democratic Party, I think Black women have been also bracing
Yeah.
themselves because we are keenly aware of what the potential is ahead of us in terms of the harm, the language, the things that we try to shield ourselves from. We know that it's coming, right? And so, what a sad day it is for us to have to arm each other by saying,
Hmm.
protect your peace, protect your well being, because we know
Hmm.
it's going to get worse. We know it's coming. We know what they're going to say about us. And so, having to navigate that along with the assassination of Sonia Massey has been just big ball of emotions that are kind of hard to place, right?
Yeah.
I also love the acknowledgement as you were talking about VP Harris, the acknowledgement that she is Black and Asian. I think that's something that's also has surfaced into conversations this week is while a lot of Black women are incredibly proud, there are a lot of Asian women, there are a lot of just
Yes.
people that are part of marginalized communities in general that are incredibly proud for this moment for all of the reasons that we don't even have to go into. And that brings me to this strong support support through all of the grassroots mobilization that's been taking place,
Mhm.
starting with Joteka Edie, who was very instrumental in, establishing the Win with Women. And by the way, that's been in place for quite some time. Many people may not realize that. They think that it just kind of came on the scene recently, but it's been in place for quite some time, strategizing. And this week was one of the great examples of how they were able to rise to the occasion. And then start a movement whereby
Mhm.
then, Black men followed, and we had
Yep.
Asian men, we had Latino women. I mean, we had white women last night, and I think I saw that the stats were maybe like 160,000 people were on that convening, that call. And so hopefully the ripple effect will continue to show forth. And I always say that regardless of what side of the aisle you're on from a political perspective, I think that what's to be highlighted and commended is our collective ability to, even at grassroots levels, to be able to mobilize around really important causes,
Mhm.
and to see the impact to be realized. I think that's something to applaud. And I just wanted to acknowledge that as well. So any thoughts from you regarding what you're seeing with all these groups being able to create all this momentum and raise dollars for VP Harris's campaign?
Yeah, I feel like in my lifetime, I've never seen this type of mobilization around a candidate. So it's really exciting. I think, in this country, a lot of times, we're just so divided politically and just polarized by so many different things. So just seeing people coming together from different backgrounds because they recognize the potential of this candidate, I think is really exciting. I think the conversations that are happening amongst people of color are necessary and need to continue to happen. That's one of the reasons why I wanted to focus my research on, just expanding the conversation around women of color. Like, of course, we have differences in our identities and our cultures, but we have so much in common. And through that coalition building, I think that we can do amazing things. So I'm excited to see what happens from this.
Yeah, coalition building is where it is. Okay, so we're going to jump into your research. I want to just bring up one other topic related to what we've started discussing so far, and that is the label of DEI hire that was
Mm,
placed on VP Harris by an elected official, and so that has stirred up a lot of concern and criticism, rightfully so. And what it brings up for me is just the heightened awareness that I think that we all are starting to experience, and we should have, around the potential for incivility to show up in so many different spaces. And I think it's important for us to arm ourselves and to know how we navigate that. So just at a high level, what are some of the things that you are telling yourself, maybe you're telling others in your network about, just, trying to make sure that we aren't losing our way around the importance of civil discourse, because discourse
mhm.
is important, but let's make sure it's civil. Let's make sure it's fair. Let's make sure it's accurate. Let's make sure we aren't harming and attacking. Um, how have you been maybe coaching and guiding, or would you coach and guide someone that will come to you for advice in that regard?
Yeah, great question. I feel like the language around DEI hire is very similar to language that I've heard and my friends have heard coming up around, affirmative action admits
Yeah.
to colleges. It's very
Yes.
similar. And so when I hear someone talking about someone at this point, like I didn't have like the language to be able to do that when I was younger. I like to ask, but what do you mean by that? Because I feel like when you get people actually talking, what you're saying black, you're using DEI
Yeah.
as a label for black or whatever
Yeah.
else. So
Yes.
and that's where people usually get caught up when you ask them to actually explain what they mean. And so I think sometimes people need to hear it out loud, and I need to hear it out
Yeah.
loud just to, because I know what you mean, but I need you to say it. Just I need you to
Yeah.
put it out into the space. And for me, just because this isn't new language to me, I don't let it get under my skin too much.
Yeah.
And for folks younger than me, I try to help them understand like sometimes you just can't talk people out of this. They're gonna feel how they feel. But even just to, like I said, to get them to explain what does this language mean to you, puts that narrative out in the space to be able to identify, you know, kind of
Yeah.
people and kind of where they're at, and be able to move forward. I don't find that it's beneficial to spend so much time and energy trying to get people who are kind of in that space to change their mind. It's kind of a futile
Yes.
effort. So it's better to kind of protect your peace, to find people who are in community to build you up. But yeah, just kind of identifying those people, like I know where you stand now, and now I'm going to go over here and protect my peace.
Yeah. Yeah. I co-sign so much of that. So thank you. Thank you, Erica. Okay. So let's talk about your journey. I want to understand your journey into higher education, what inspired you to pursue a career, and to also make sure that a DEI lens was very much a part of your educational career.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really interesting because when I started college, I thought I was going to go to law school. I had
I as
majored,
well.
yeah, I decided I was going to major in computer science. I was going to go to law school, but Davidson College had different plans for me. I really credit because I would have never thought that I would have gone into education, never in a million years. But my experience at Davidson College, being a liberal arts institution, really shaped who I am now as a professional. And so when I started Davidson, I was a part of a really great peer mentoring program for students of color called Stride. And, you know, going in 18, I had grown up in a very homogenous community. So I went to a predominantly Black high school. I went to a predominantly Black church. So I was around people that looked like me all of the time.
And
And
then you went
so
to Davidson.
yes, yes. I wanted a different experience, but I think like knowing in my head, like, okay, I know I'm going to a PWI, and then actually being there was very different.
Yeah.
So just like the little things of, and I'm very sensitive. So just like the little things of like, you know, walking on campus and like waving to people who would not wave back or look away or walk to the other side of the road to avoid me. I'm like, what is happening? So that was
Mm,
really the first time I had experienced, like I knew there were different people, but just like understanding that my difference meant something in society that was devalued. I think that was kind of my first experience of that. And so the peer mentoring program was so important for me to feel like I belonged on that campus, to
mm,
see people who looked like me, people who had different identities for me, who understood that feeling of being othered, for us to come together, to be supported by our upperclassmen mentors, by faculty and staff who, you know, instilled in us that like this place is for you. And even beyond that feeling, just learning more about that program and why it was created. Like before it was created, they were bringing Black and brown students to Davidson, but they would not stay. There was something about
yeah.
that environment that caused them to leave.
Mm,
And then the creation of that program changed those dynamics in terms of retention and persistence. So I dove fully into that experience. I always say that Stride was the reason that I stayed at Davidson, because I
mm,
definitely had moments where I felt like I wanted to leave. So I became a peer mentor. My senior year, I was peer mentor coordinator. And so just as I navigated that space, it really encouraged me to branch out. Once I knew I had that home base in that peer mentoring
yeah.
program, I was able to branch out, and then just realizing like I can be that person to give that to other students of color, other marginalized students,
Yeah.
which encouraged me to want to pursue my master's in student affairs. And ironically, in that space, my graduate assistantship was working with a peer mentoring program of color at Clemson. So that kind of just like built on my journey, being able to myself being a marginalized student on a PWI campus, and then being the person to support those students was really exciting for me.
Thank you for taking on us on that journey. So much I want to just comment on. First of all, you know, you use the word belong, and that is such a powerful word. It's something that all of us have a need for, regardless of our background and demographics. We all want to be validated, accepted, and feel a sense of belonging. The other thing that stood out to me about your journey at Davison was that it took intentionality, which was this creation of a peer mentoring program for you
Mhm.
to then feel like I'm not going to be one of those in the past that have come in and then left, because you
Hmm.
said they had this historically this recurring theme of people coming in that are part of underrepresented populations but then leaving back out. So that retention piece was solved in many regards for some students like yourself
Hmm.
by just being intentional to create some type of connection point, which I think is an important takeaway, because it does require intentionality if we really want to make people feel that strong sense of belonging. And we're seeing that transferred into a lot of now corporate spaces,
Yes. Hmm.
whereby employee resource groups are being established, maybe formal mentorship programs or sponsorship programs are being established just for the benefit of helping those historically underrepresented populations feel a sense of acceptance and value. And so thank you so much for taking us on that journey. Now let's talk about your dissertation, because we've referenced superwoman role a couple
Hmm.
times now, and I really want us to unpack that. So your dissertation focused on superwoman role and women of color. And so give us an overview of this concept, its significance, and what came from your research, your study.
Yeah, absolutely. So very basically, the superwoman role is really feeling the need to do it all, do it well, and do it on your own. So that's the very basic. So a little bit of kind of history of kind of where the concept came from. So the language really emerged around like the late 70s, early 80s. So there's a Black feminist author and professor, Michelle Williams. She has a book called Black Macho and the Myth of the Superwoman. So that was kind of one of the earliest time where this kind of came into the social consciousness. And so Michelle Wallace talks about the superwoman role for Black women being an extension and the reversal of white stereotypes about Black inferiority. So think about the stereotype of the mammy, the Jezebel, the welfare queen. And so the superwoman is kind of the opposite of that, but still a stereotype. And so the Black superwoman is characterized as hypersexual, physically strong, and overly aggressive. And so, as the years went on, other Black feminist authors like Patricia Hill Collins explored this kind of theme, and a lot of folks may know it also as the strong Black woman role. And so, we as Black women, a lot of times have kind of taken on this role as a response to living within this racist economy of the
Yeah.
United States. And so, the kind of dominant powers kind of have taken this and again made into this stereotype to justify their brutality against Black people. So if you think about like in the medical space, this idea that Black women can withstand more pain, and so they're not given painkillers. So this is kind of how the superwoman role shows up in our everyday life. And so a lot of times we have kind of taken on and internalized this myth because it's just an attempt for us to survive,
Survive.
for us to do what we have to
Survive.
do. Exactly, exactly. And so more recently, Dr. Cheryl Woods Giscombe, who is a professor in nursing at Chapel Hill, kind of
Mhm.
reworked these concepts in her superwoman schema and then operationalized it into a questionnaire. And so the Superwoman schema really captures the response of Black women to racialized and gender depression, highlighting their socialization to be strong. So this obligation to present an image of strength, suppressing their emotions, resisting vulnerability, this intense motivation to succeed despite limited resources, and this desire to help others at their own expense. So negating self-care. And so, in Dr. Giscombe's study, she talked to different focus groups of Black women in different professional spaces. And so, just kind of talking about their experiences, resulting in not asking for help in a lot of instances, feeling the pressure to do more because of the scarcity for Black women in these higher up spaces. So, they feel like, I'm the only one or one of the only, so I have to do more and be more, in addition to being mothers, being partners, being involved in their families. So doing all of these and showing up for all of these different spaces and roles. And so for my particular research, I wanted to build on this foundation and expand it to women of color, because other non-Black women of color also are living in this
Sure.
racialized and gender depression, and are experiencing that in different ways. And it was also one of the implications of Dr. Giscombe's research to kind of see if this could be applicable to Asian women, Latina women, multiracial women. So I wanted to look at that specifically at the experience of graduate women of color. We're kind of at this intersection of their students, but a lot of times, and I was definitely in this place in my graduate program, working full time or part time. A lot of the women that I spoke to were mothers, were spouses, were caring for aging family members, were involved in
Mhm.
their communities. So we're doing all of these different roles. In addition to persisting through their academic degree. So what I was really trying to find out was, one, is the superwoman schema applicable to non-Black women of color? And are there differences that statistically between different racial and ethnic groups? And then also, what are these different roles that they're navigating as they're persisting through the degrees? And what does the environment of a predominantly white institution, is that aiding their progression? Is it hindering it in certain ways? And there's really, really interesting results. I'll kind of highlight some of those. I think the first thing I went going and thinking is that because this concept was created around Black women, that Black women are going to be experiencing higher instances of superwoman schema. That wasn't the case. The two participants in my study that experienced the highest instances of superwoman schema, one was Latina and one was Asian. And I was
Mm.
wondering, like, this is really interesting finding. But I think because this kind of dialogue has been happening for Black women for a long time,
Yeah.
and maybe not as much for other communities, we have found ways to kind of mitigate it,
Yeah.
whereas other
To
communities
cope. Yeah.
exactly may have not. And so that was really interesting. A lot of the women really talked about kind of these experiences in similar ways. So one of the big similarities is like, okay, where did you learn these strategies, these behaviors from? Learned it from my mother, learned it from my grandmother,
Mm.
learned it from my family. And this is again across racial groups. This is a set of behaviors that is passed down from generation to generation. There was also really interesting findings around women from immigrant backgrounds. So, their families came to the United States, so they feel this pressure to succeed, to pay their family back for their sacrifices. Again, across racial groups. Um, and then when it comes to kind of the environmental factor, so I talked to students who were all at one predominantly white institution in very different majors. So some of them were in STEM, some of them were in social sciences, law, so different schools, but all had a lot of similar things to say about their experience, and how being at this institution a lot of times hindered and bolstered their instances of superwoman syndrome, and hindered their well-being and self-care. Sometimes because of faculty. So we talk about DEI hire, faculty treating them as a DEI or affirmative action hire. So there's all this effort to bring them into the program for their diversity numbers, but once they get there, their experience is completely different, as if
Yeah.
they're unwanted. Similar with their peers. There was also a lot around finances, so being able to fund their education, which created a lot of stress as well. But I guess in positive things, because I don't want to make it all sound negative, they were able to, even despite these limited resources and this intense motivation to succeed, find spaces. If it was in their department, some of them had a mentor, advisor who they felt like, this is my person. If I don't have anybody else, I have this person.
Right.
Or
Right.
even going outside of their department to find community amongst the university, amongst the larger academic community. They were able to go out and find that. So that was really interesting to me and also really resonated with me, like I said, as a graduate student who was also working full time throughout my program. So I definitely resonated with those feelings of having to prove myself, sometimes feeling very isolated in my journey as a doctoral student. but also was really thankful for the community that I did find in my program and outside my program as well.
Yeah. I'm sitting with this, Dr. Erica. This is so fascinating. So fascinating. Just a couple points to highlight. What's coming up for me is that I almost feel like this superwoman phenomenon can be both a blessing and a curse, right?
Absolutely.
And I think that a lot of us can identify with both of those tension points, right?
Hmm.
Because a blessing in that, this resilience that many of us show up to different spaces with has a lot to do with having to navigate the trauma
Hmm.
and being and seeing our mothers model
Hmm.
that strength, and so we kind of take that on, right? A curse in the sense that when we do have legitimate needs, which we do all the time, to be able
Yes.
just to not have to show up so strong and
Yes.
resilient, but to be supported and poured into and just given our moments to kind of feel what we're feeling, right?
Absolutely.
And so it certainly is a blessing and a curse in many regards, and navigating the two tension points can be really, really difficult. The thing that comes up for me as well is when I think about, you reference kind of the one and only. There's so many different reasons, and you gave us plenty of them from your research, which sounds like it was very well done. So thank you. And we did share your dissertation overview in the chat for those that are interested. But it sounds like being like a one and only is definitely a part of having to show up a certain way, because it's like we're
Absolutely.
representing for all people that are part of that identity,
Hmm.
and that creates a high level of pressure, right, that no one wants. And so that can be very, very hard to navigate as well. And when we think about, we show up this way because we have to in order to live and survive,
Hmm.
that is saddening. It's
Yes.
saddening, it's maddening, it's definitely something that we have to pay attention to, because I'm also keenly aware of a lot of the studies that are out there around the illnesses that
Yes.
this high level of stress is creating for many populations, including a lot of Black women. And when I said this is fascinating, I was not expecting you, Dr. Erica, to say that part of what you found was that there were also other populations of women that felt it, not only to the extent, but even more so. And
Hmm.
so I felt that to be really, really interesting. And thank you for highlighting that. We have someone in our community today, Nicole, thank you for sharing in the chat, but she mentioned I can relate as a Latina, as well as an
Hmm.
eldest daughter.
Yep.
So there's a lot of
Also an
different,
eldest daughter.
yes,
Yep.
also there's a lot of different scenarios that can play into the level of intensity or not in which we feel the pressure of this superwoman phenomenon. So I
Hmm.
just found all of that to be incredibly fascinating, and I thank you for taking us on that journey of understanding what you found. And I do encourage folks to take a look at the dissertation research, and to get a deeper understanding of the work that Dr. Erica did. So I'm going to be shifting momentarily to take questions or comments from our community here. And so I want to invite you to go ahead and be thinking about where curiosities are surfacing for you, what's percolating in your minds that you want to maybe socialize around. And if you're part of our Zoom community, if you will use the raise hand feature, that lets me know that you're willing to be called upon, added to the spotlight if your camera is on, and to share directly. Otherwise, you can go to the chat and place your questions or comments there. If you're on LinkedIn Live, go to the comment section. We're going to bring those questions over here to the Zoom community and make sure that in the allotted time we can get to as many as possible. I'm going to go to the next question while people are percolating on that. And this next question is still related to the superwoman role, but I mentioned at the start, top of the hour, that July is BIPOC Mental Health Awareness Month. And
Hmm.
so I want to just have you to elaborate on, how do you see the superwoman role impacting mental and emotional well-being of women of color, and particularly in professional settings, Dr. Erica?
Yeah, absolutely. So if we think about just kind of relating it to my research, a college campus, that is basically a professional setting for
Yeah.
students. So I feel like
Mhm.
just a lot of this is going to be applicable. So researchers have talked about how the environment of predominantly white institutions create additional stress and resentment, placing women of color in a scenario where we feel we have to constantly prove ourselves more than our peers. And these experiences just wreak can wreak havoc on our spirits,
Yeah.
feeling this is called shifting. So feeling this chipping away at your sense of self, this feeling of wholeness and centeredness. And so different psychological issues like anxiety, depression, low self-esteem, and self-hatred can manifest as a result of shifting. Many of you may have heard of the poem "We Wear the Mask" by Paul Laurence Dunbar. And so this experience of shifting is likened to wearing a mask. So we wear the mask that grins and lies, that hides our cheeks and shades
We
our
wear the
eyes. So
mask.
it's a protective strategy for a lot of students of color, and sometimes they stifle their own voice and may take on a more dominant Eurocentric one to fit in and continue to suppress their identities. Sometimes they police their language. So instead of, maybe if you're using African American vernacular English, you may be trying to speak more quote unquote proper English, or not speaking in your native language around folks. So thinking about your appearance, so maybe not wearing your natural hair, feeling the pressure to straighten your hair, feeling the need to control how they're perceived by their superiors. And so, for students who are in their doctoral pursuits, they recognize that this academic mass was necessary for them to get through their program and succeed, but also they recognize that it was damaging to their well-being. And so recently this week, as I was even preparing for this, there was a article that was circling around on social media called "How Being Silently Pissed Off is Fueling Autoimmune Disorders in Women of
Oh,
Color." I don't know if you saw that, but I was like, huh, this is interesting. And it talks about how suppressing emotions is not only damaging to your mental and emotional health, but also to your physical health. And that anger and holding in that anger is attributed to autoimmune diseases such as lupus, rheumatoid arthritis. In 2020, there was a team of researchers that found an increased incidences of autoimmune diseases in people with high levels of stress and depressive conditions. And then in 2022, a team of researchers at the University of Pittsburgh found that women of color, specifically, who agreed with the statement that "I rarely express my anger those close to me," were 70% more likely to experience carotid atherosclerosis. And there are other, like irritable bowel syndrome, chronic fatigue syndrome, are prominent among women who have depression, anxiety, and are suppressing their emotions. So literally, not only mentally, emotionally, but has a physical impact on our health if we continue to uphold this superwoman syndrome.
absolutely. And we know that certainly it can be fatal. We've seen a lot of
Hmm.
that. So this is a really, really important topic. You referenced we wear the mask. I did share into the chat that particular point. So thank you for bringing that to the conversation. And as you were dropping lots of great nuggets, in particular people that you've been inspired by for your research, we're also trying to source that and place it into the chat for those who may be interested in going a step further. Okay, so I'm not seeing any hands raised right now, so that's okay. Still keep thinking about your curiosities. I'm going to go to my next question. So let's talk about some innovative DEI programs, maybe that you have crafted and executed. What outcomes from those efforts have you observed that you can share with this community?
Yeah, probably the thing that I am most proud of my time in higher education, was the creation of the Women of Worth initiative at UNC Chapel Hill. So I started there in 2015 as a peer mentor coordinator for programs for incoming students. And while I was there, just kind of learning my job, I love to talk to students and just learn about their experiences. And so one thing that was coming up as I talked to my Black women students and other women of color students is that they wanted a space for them to connect and build community. In earlier recent years, there had been hired a coordinator for men of color engagement because of the lower persistence and retention, because it was
Yeah,
absolutely needed. But they were like,
yeah,
well, but what about us? Like, yes, we're graduating on time, we're persisting, but we're not thriving while we're here. So we want
yeah,
something that can help us not just survive to the finish line, but thrive and build connection while we're here. So I was able to collaborate with two amazing women who worked in residence life at the time, Angelica Matos and Arian Mickles. And we came together because they were having conversations with their RAs, and brought together kind of this pilot study of a group of women saying, like, if we created something for y'all, what would y'all want that to look like? And so
Mhm.
taking their feedback, bringing together a coalition of faculty and staff, women faculty and staff from across campus, creating this initiative with the goal of across campus collaboration. So undergraduates, graduates, faculty, and staff, bringing them together to build those connections. So our first event was a welcome event at the beginning of the year. So we had this idea of, like, we're going to put it out there. We'll see what happens. Um, 200 plus women
Wow.
showed up, and we were just
Wow.
overwhelmed and like, okay, this is a thing that's needed. So we continued to build out the program. We ended up having a conference where students could present their own research, and connect with faculty. I had an amazing team of work study students. I think one is on the call today, who is, now doing amazing things. And so
Oh,
just seeing my students who were part of this program flourishing and thriving in their own careers, partly because they had that space to be able to express themselves, a space to build their leadership, a space to build connections and friendships with others. I think was probably, like I said, my most impactful contribution in my higher ed career.
I love that. And you should be very proud of that. Thank you for your leadership, your efforts, and for sharing with us in a way that hopefully is inspiring many of us who are thinking about how can I play a role in helping to create that sense of belonging and acceptance and pathway of success for people that may not be as well supported. And so thank you so much for that. And a special shout out to all of Dr. Wallace's students that may be joining us today. I do want to acknowledge that as well. You said something really important, and I see we have a hand raised, so I'm going to go to you, Tracy, next. So get prepared. But it's really what's coming up for me is the value of community, because that has
Mhm.
been threaded through a lot of our conversations today. So that can't be understated. And the other thing is the value of seeking feedback when we are trying to create solutions for populations of people. You said we got the feedback. We asked them, what does support look like for you? I'm
Mhm.
paraphrasing here, but you wanted to know. And so I love the idea of us leaning into the intentionality of co-creating the experiences with the people in which we're trying to
Yes,
benefit, right? We need to create with, not for. And so I
exactly.
just wanted to highlight that as well. Okay, so Tracy, thanks for being here with us today. I'm going to add you, if you'd like, to our spotlight and allow you to unmute yourself to share. Welcome. Present your question or comments for us.
Excellent. I just really wanted to share a comment in this talk is reminding me of how difficult it is to get out of the superwoman syndrome. And women, Black women, people of color sometimes don't know how to balance that, and they don't know how to do it. And what we're seeing is increasingly people are either putting on themselves, which is like unfortunately suicides, or they're quitting on their jobs to just up and say, forget it, I've had enough, to save their own sanity, or they're leaving the country. And I've just increasingly seen this expat community, different names, different podcasts, or YouTubes that are like circulating, where people are just deciding that they almost have to quit to choose themselves. And I just wanted to get your reaction to that.
Yeah, I
Thank
mean
you.
that. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for your question. Unfortunately, that's a reality. I have an acquaintance that I recently saw her post on Instagram. She was in a doctoral program, and that she posted about leaving her doctoral program to focus on her mental health. And I'm sure that wasn't an easy decision for her. Um, but it's better to do that, to kind of give up on this um idea of what success is, because I'm sure she wanted that real bad. but her being here and being healthy and whole is a lot more important. So I think it's important for people to evaluate the spaces that they're in. And if they feel like they're in a space that doesn't support their well-being, mental, emotional, and they can have the resources to get out, they should. I have definitely been in toxic work situations where I had to leave. Was it easy? Absolutely not. But I think it was the best decision for me. And I think part of that was the community that was around me, that was able to see like this is not healthy for you. How can I help support you and to help you get into a different situation? Now, it didn't happen overnight, but I had to make the decision to, move on into a space in a community that was better and supported my wellness.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Erica. And Tracy, thank you for your question and for being here with us. I know that you are routinely a part of our community, and we really do appreciate that. That is $1 million question. How do we break the superwoman role? So thank you. Thank you so much, Tracy. I want to just add something to what you shared, Erica. I think a lot of it too, in terms of how we break it, is through what we're doing right now, talking
Mhm.
about it, bringing
Mhm.
awareness to it, because I think that we have been so conditioned to this phenomenon that it's natural for us. It's just
Yeah.
who we are, it's how we
Yeah.
show up. So until it's brought to our attention that this is harmful for us and the
Yes.
reasons why and some strategies for really trying to overcome that and step away from, that role as being something that's a permanent fixture in our lives, then I think that we are going to find ourselves in this continuous vicious cycle of just continuing this,
Mhm.
leaning into it instead of really trying to back away from it. So for all of us who are here today and we are privy to this message, go to your girlfriends, go to your friends, your family members, your associates, your coworkers, your colleagues, and let's just start normalizing conversations around, the superwoman role and how we need to combat that. I think that's critically important. Okay,
Yeah.
so I think we may have some time for additional questions. So I want to remind you we have 10 minutes left. I think you may have wanted to share something. Did I cut you off?
Oh, no, you didn't cut me off. I was
Okay.
just going to completely agree and say that that's definitely something that came out with my participants, just like reflecting and being thankful for the opportunity to talk about all of the things that they're doing. And I think that self-awareness piece is key. And even for me, it was a big self-reflective point, recognizing the ways that I've adopted the superwoman role in the ways that it's been very beneficial to me in my career and my academic pursuits, but also recognizing the ways that it's impacted my mental, emotional health, the ways that it's created distance between me and people that I love, having to present myself as having it all together. I think,
Mm,
particularly with my siblings, I mentioned being the oldest sibling. So, feeling that pressure that as the oldest, I have to have it together. I have to be the example
mhm.
for them, and realizing as now I'm older, that definitely created distance between us. And now that we're older, we're able to be a little bit more vulnerable with each other about the things that we're carrying, which I think has been really helpful for our relationship. So I kind of close the end of my dissertation with like, I know there's going to be some points in my life I'm going to have to put on the cape because it's going to be necessary for my survival,
Right.
for my family, for my community, but I don't want to wear it all the time. And I'm taking it off
Exactly.
now, which is why I took 6 months off after I was done with this dissertation to just like rest and recover.
Yes.
So yeah,
Yeah.
sometimes you need it, but you shouldn't have it on all the time.
Absolutely. Don't burn your capes, but just put them maybe in the back of the closet where
Yes,
they're still accessible, but they're not like the first thing that you grab to put on each
exactly.
day. Yeah, no, I love that. And I'm glad that you took time for yourself too, because I find that when you do work of this nature and you're surrounded by content that you can relate to in many ways, that really can be traumatizing. That really
Hmm.
takes an intentional effort of just, stepping away and recharging so that that doesn't just continue to fester and
Hmm.
create any type of unnecessary stress that again can lead to illness and all the other things that we've talked about in this conversation. And
Hmm.
I agree, Nicole, who's part of our podcast community today, she says check on your strong friends.
Yes.
I often tell my friends that when I get quiet, that's when I need you to check on me.
Mm.
When I get quiet, that's when I need you to check on me. And so whatever it is, whatever your thing is, um, share those codes, with your friends, with those that
Yes.
you're in community with, so that they can be observant and mindful. I think that's so incredibly important. The other thing that I want to mention as well, in terms of what we can do to, again, help us break out of this superwoman mode, is there's a lot to be said for modeling. I
Yes.
think that when people model, and they model loudly, that they are not subjecting themselves to the superwoman role, it gives other women permission to do the same, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's almost like I heard someone say before, when we were talking about this burnt out work culture and how people were working like just enormous amount of hours, especially in this virtual, because it's hard to kind of separate when you're working remotely, work from your personal life, and really cutting it
Mm-hmm.
off. And so I heard a CEO say before, I now lead loudly. I will make an announcement. I'm leaving. I'm going home. I'm signing off. I'll check back in tomorrow. If anything is urgent, let me know. But otherwise, I'm not checking my email,
Mm-hmm.
So there's something to be said for modeling, and modeling loudly when we're trying to really combat this. We have to be superwoman all day, every day. And I think the other thing, which is inspired by what you shared with us from your research, is that those of us who are mothers, who are caretakers, who are mother figures, who have nieces and nephews that look up to us, we need to also make sure that we're being even more intentional, I think, to model that
Mm-hmm.
it is okay for us to not always feel like we have to be on 100% and have that cape on.
Mm-hmm.
And I even think about myself as a mother to a strong activist daughter who gets it honest in terms of her drive and motivation. I'm like, okay, what have I done? I need to maybe go back and try to repair some things, just to make sure that I am not sending a message that is what's expected,
Mm-hmm.
of her. And so anyway, that was really impressionable to me, and I appreciate you sharing that. Um, Okay, so there's a comment that is in the chat, and I want to make sure I've acknowledged it. This is from Tracy. I've started to train myself at work to say that if something is not done, then so be it. I allow
Mm-hmm.
some things to be left for another day. That's a good practice. Reminding myself to work human, and that I am human, and that I am human has honored me, has allowed me to honor my self-worth. That's very beautifully put. Thank you so much, Tracy. So appreciate that.
I love that.
Okay.
And I will just quickly shout out,
Yeah,
I really appreciate that I now am in a work environment that really values wellness. I really appreciate my
that's good.
supervisor modeling, he lets us know like I'm going to be on PTO. He encourages us to take PTO. This is the first work environment that I've ever been in that where I've had a supervisor encourage me to take PTO. So those environments absolutely do exist, and I encourage folks to find them.
Yeah, find those environments. Well-being right now is so important. And I do think that it requires not only a commitment to self, right? But it also requires those who are in positions of influence and leadership within the workplace to also help to ensure that the culture and the environment is one that allows people to not feel like they have to burn themselves out
Hmm.
to the detriment of being employed and caring for their families and having a livelihood. I think that's so important, and a big message that I do believe is gaining a lot of momentum. We just have to continue putting the pressure on that message because it is just that important. Okay, so we're almost at the top of the hour, and I hate that, Dr. Erica, because I feel like there's so much more you probably could unpack and share with us regarding the research that you've done and the impact that you're making in the spaces where you show up. And so I first want to thank you, from one Black woman to another. I want to thank you for all of the work and the leadership that you're putting in to really help us as women to see ourselves in a better light, and also to encourage those who are in influential leadership positions to help also create those environments where we can show up at our best. I want to give you an opportunity to close us out in a way that feels good for you. And one of the ways in which we invite our guest co-hosts to do that is we've spent a lot of time talking about a lot of things, but is there something that you're really feeling emboldened around, passionate around, lots of energy for, that we have not talked about, that you desire to socialize with this community?
Yes. Again, thank you, Dr. Nika, and thank you everyone
Yeah.
for being here. I guess one takeaway that I would like to leave everyone with is, again, just emphasizing the importance of coalition building, not only among women of color, but among all of us, so that we can see our commonalities, so we can grow empathy for our differences and come together to support each other and tear down institutional structures that create barriers for our success and well-being. So however you can do that in your own communities, in your workspaces, on your universities, try to reach out and be able to do that. I think it's important.
That is a great note to end on. I want to thank our audience for being here with us today. Please join us again next week for another episode of Intentional Conversations podcast, where we will be welcoming Daisy Dominguez, a great conversation that's going to be. So make sure you're spreading the word. Also, if you found this hour to be really rich and helpful for you, and you think it could be of value to someone else, be sure to share the podcast or the replay and make sure that people in your network have a chance to also be a part of this rich dialogue that took place today. And last but not least, we love your feedback. And so my team is going to drop into the chat a quick link with very simple, questions just to get your feedback. It always helps us to know if this is providing value to our community, and we take your feedback incredibly seriously. So we hope that you have a wonderful, safe weekend, and we hope to see you back next week. And again, we'll stay on for a few more seconds. I see that the link was just dropped, so we'll make sure you can capture that. But thanks so much for being here with us today. Thank you again, Dr. Erica.
Thank you.